Proceeds of crime, what is it?
Well, proceeds of crime in the civil sense typically involves the restraint of property to deprive persons who have obtained property via unlawful means.
It's law that's been put in place to, if someone's acquired something illegally, for example, I've been doing something illegally and I've acquired assets via that, so maybe I'm dealing drugs and I've got money from that, or I might be, money laundering or something along those lines and I've acquired assets from that. This law is put in place to take that away from me, essentially. Is that correct?
Absolutely. The goal is for the ultimate forfeiture of that asset to the government. And it not necessarily involves just the acquisition from unlawful means, but it could be an asset that's been used in connection with an offence.
It's not just proceeds that I've gained or something I've got as a benefit of that activity. It might be something I'm using to conduct that activity as well.
Absolutely. To facilitate the offence, for example, it could be a property that's been used to store drugs, for example, and that property would be considered an instrument in the offending because it's facilitated the trafficking or the dealing in that particular offence.
Let's go through some examples of what kind of situation might lead to someone needing your services in relation to proceeds of crime.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a couple of examples, obviously not naming names or anything like that,
yes,
but general examples where these kind of circumstances would lead to your input?
There are a couple of common scenarios, the first of which is when someone is served with a restraining order. They won't have any notice of the order until after it's made. That's because the applications are made ex parte, and the reason that the authorities apply without giving notice of the application to the persons affected is so that they diminish the risk of dissipation of that particular property.
Madison Branson have established themselves as becoming authority in the proceeds of crime space. Can you talk to that a bit, how you've established that authority and maybe any cases that have really helped to establish your footprint in the area?
Well, under the Proceeds of Crime Act in the last 10 years, there are a number of provisions that were not regularly used by the Australian Federal Police, for example, and those areas were untested. They were applied at a time when we were involved in acting for a client. For example, there was one scenario where our client's mother, the Commissioner of the Australian Federal Police had applied to examine our client's mother. Our client at the time was a co-accused in an outstanding criminal proceeding. We were concerned about the prospect of the use of the information obtained via the examination of our client's mother against our client in the related criminal proceeding. So we objected to the examination on the basis that the material that is derived from that examination should not be made available to the persons involved in the criminal proceeding.
And what was the outcome of that?
Yeah, there was a quarantining order made, so that prevented any information that was obtained via that examination from being provided to those involved in the criminal proceeding, and prevented those involved in the criminal proceeding from being present during the examination.
And was that case used as a basis for future cases?
Yeah, absolutely. There was an amendment to the Proceeds of Crime Act in 2016 that concerned the use of direct or derivative information from various mechanisms from which you can obtain information under the Proceeds of Crime Act. And that case was relied on a number of times in subsequent authorities.
What's the number one piece of information that you'd give someone who's received a restraining or freeze order?
A very simple one, which is to act quickly and seek legal advice.